talking to the public, I think I have to say it's something I've found immensely useful and immensely interesting. It's something I'm really glad that I've done over the years, because it really helps you put a new, fresh and broader perspective on your own little piece of work that you're doing. Genome editing or gene editing it's a revolutionary new technology that is going to transform the whole of life sciences, because it's got the potential to do so many things quicker, more precisely than we've ever been able to do before. I think it's really important to explain to the public what it is that we want to do, why we're trying to do it, and what the ramifications of that might be.
What's special about genome editing is that it is hugely powerful in its potential across a multitude of fields, be it biotechnology, medicine, pharmaceuticals, but also agriculture and plant science. It really has the ability to change the world in most aspects as we know it.
It is very important that we all engage in the genome editing dialogue and that we lend our voices for the greater good in order to inform decision making in what should be possible, what is possible to develop in the future, and what kind of concessions we're willing to make in order to get to that final end. If we fail to do so, that might create further disparities and applications and developments that might be accessible only to few with a very disgregated society.
The thing that's really happened in the last few years is that it's got a lot easier and a lot more efficient to do, and it also has been applied to many more systems. So typically we've been editing the genome for quite a long time, many decades, and it's only more recently that we've actually been able to do this in organisms that are not the standard model organisms that you use in the lab. So there's kind of two things. One is that that's now become accessible and easier to do, so it allows us to do a lot more than we would have done before. And secondly, it means that we can apply it to systems which are more relevant to what people in the public world would be interested in.
It's the strong view of Genetic Alliance UK that policy should be made with the contribution from all stakeholders concerned. So we work hard to involve patient voice in policy making, but it's crucial also that experts that understand the potential of a technology and that might use that technology also get involved in making and designing the policy that will ultimately regulate all the use of genome editing in the UK and around the world.
I think we are in a tipping point at the moment in which genome editing is not only being used as a research tool, but is being almost at the point of developing applications. So it is very important to engage, because we need society to develop hand in hand with the technology so that they are informed, they feel informed for when decisions are needed to be made.
With a technology like genome editing that has so much potential, it's crucial that public dialogue on this topic is balanced and well informed, so that the public opinion of this technology doesn't travel in a direction that doesn't mean that we can use the technology. If public opinion on some of the more controversial aspects of genome editing, like reproductive choice in the future, germline therapies, goes in a direction that is negative towards genome editing, then our community of people living with rare genetic conditions might not be able to benefit from its potential.
From the Orion project, we have produced this public attitude survey on life sciences research, on public involvement in this kind of research, and also particularly on genome editing. This survey, the findings will inform the public dialogue that I described for the future. And there we found that 53%, across the 6 countries that it was run, 53% of the audiences were aware of the term genome editing. That means that there is still a lot of work to be done in order for everybody to be familiar with the term. However, we also found that there was a lot of appetite for being involved. Actually, we saw that there was a lot of interest for public involvement into scientific research. So they were very interested in topics that related to health and to the relationship between DNA and health and disease, and also into the research process. So not only the results themselves, but from decision making into what research lines are being done, into how it is developed, and then to finally producing those results and publishing those results.
Public engagement has to be a conversation. It can't just be a monologue. And so the why of public engagement has to be about finding out what people think about any particular new development. And there the questions are likely to be the same sort of questions that get asked of any other, big ambitious attempt to change the world, which are questions of, well, who's going to benefit? What are the risks? Who are those risks going to fall on? Who will take responsibility? Who's making the decisions? Who's in charge? Who's going to take responsibility if something goes wrong? Those sorts of big political questions are the questions that quite often come to the surface in the sort of public conversations that happen around science and technology. And those can be really difficult ones for scientists to answer.
Now is a great time to have the conversation about genome editing. I think it's never too early to have that conversation, to start that conversation. And it's important that that conversation involves all aspects of society and anyone who's interested particularly in genome editing and how it might affect them and the people that are around them, people they love. It's important for researchers to engage with the public because there's maybe a little bit of a mismatch at the moment between the expectations for genome editing and what scientists are doing in their labs. And it's really important to have that dialogue and to have those conversations about how genome editing is currently being used, what it is capable of doing, how it's helping us with research, and how it's helping us to answer some of those fundamental questions about how our bodies work and what function genes play in health and disease.
Genome editing has been captured in the media quite a lot, and it's talked about a lot. And because it has so much potential across human health, but outside of that too, in food and agriculture and other uses too, it's important that our conversations about genome editing are making sense to the public who might not have a great understanding of what genome editing is and what it can do. We hear terms like CRISPR thrown around, and we need to link everything together and make sure people are on the same page as each other.
I think there's two main things that I always say. One is to really master the implications of whatever project it is that you are working on. You have to be able to explain it to anybody in a few simple terms, sentences. And so sort of the pure act of public engagement for a scientist really forces you into that space where you have to give the broad strokes, the general overview, take on whatever it is that your project deals with. And that's a skill, actually, and that's a skill that is also employed in science when it comes to writing a paper and a narrative. It's just a slightly different audience.
It works on both ways, so it's beneficial for people to understand what is happening. They have a huge vested interest in where things are going, particularly but with biomedical applications. Very often the interest is fueled by patients themselves who are desperate for cures, but desperate for answers. And so it helps to communicate directly as a scientist. It helps communicate to them what is actually within possible reach at this time. Very often headlines and articles can give a perception of a technology that it's going to fix everything and that would be overnight, or it argues about things that should or should not happen when they're not even within the realms of reality in the foreseeable future. So being the advocate and the voice of what is real and what is happening, what's present now and what's possible now is really within the job of the researcher. So communicating with the public has a massive effect on policy change and how legislation can be shaped. Very often it's not, the push doesn't necessarily come from the researchers doing the work, but actually the public who are hoping to see a technology pushed across the line. An example of that was with the mitochondrial replacement therapy, and this going through Parliament. Really it was driven by patients who desperately wanted to have a chance to have a family and a chance to have an unaffected child. So they're really loud voices, and they're so important to communicate between the researchers and patients and the public in general, because that can make a big difference to what happens in Parliament.
Scientists need the public. We need public support to be able to use science in the community. There's no point developing new treatments or genome editing if we can't then use it to better the world or improve health. So we need the public, and I think we as scientists owe it to the public to make them aware of what we do. Also, it's fun, it's exciting. If you love your job and you love your science, why wouldn't you want to share it? It also makes you think of new things to do. Like some stranger you've never met who has no scientific background could make a single comment to you that you think, I had not thought about that, that's really interesting. And it's about breaking down the barriers and having a conversation, and we owe it to the public.
I think it's important for researchers to engage the public with anything. I think it's part of your job as a researcher to communicate what it is that you do with the public, because what you are doing is important, and the public deserve to know what it is that is being advanced. It's of huge interest to so many people, but particularly with genome editing, it's important to highlight the potentials without allowing the doubts to creep into the conversation, to maybe put people's minds at ease about what it is that you're doing.
For laboratory scientists, I guess one response would be to say, well, this doesn't apply to me because I'm just doing the basic science. It's for the people, developing crops or developing treatments. They're the ones that are close to the public. And I would say that's missing an opportunity. I think if we're going to have that upstream discussion, the people in the lab need to be involved in that discussion too, because it's, they are doing their work for a particular reason. You're driven by a desire to find something out or to make the world a better place. And those are things that can and should be talked about in public.